In today's video, we're talking about the Hebrew word CHESED. It's a word describing the love of God that is used all throughout the Old Testament. One problem: there is no English word that correctly translates CHESED into our language. And I've never really been quite satisfied with the definitions that I've been given for the Hebrew word CHESED. So I made up one of my own. In this video Bible study, we're going to have fun figuring out how to describe the chesed of God and what he requires of us. Okay, so I want to pass out some scripture. Joe and Brendan, you're in my top first screen. So Brendan, will you read Jeremiah 32:18? And Joe, will you read Lamentations 3:22? Yep. Tanja, you're next. Will you please read Isaiah 54:10? And Mita, would you look up Ruth 3:10? And Francine, you're next. Would you do Jonah 4:2? And Christy, would you mind reading Lamentations chapter 3, verse 31 and 32? Lamentations chapter 3, verse 31 and 32. Jeannie, you're next. Jeannie, will you read Micah 6:8? Brenda, you feel comfortable reading? Okay, would you read Hosea chapter 2, verse 19 and 20? Judy, you're next. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 17. I'm sorry, Judy, that's the worst. That's the only negative use of this word. It is terrible. I hate that I gave that one to you. I'm gonna give you two, Judy, so you can have a positive two. Will you also look up Joel chapter 2, verse 13? Leviticus chapter 20. Yeah. Verse 17.
Yeah.
And Joel chapter 2, verse 13.
Okay.
Ken, please read Psalm 26:3. Ken, hey, do you hear me? Read Psalm 26:3. I'm going to have you look that one up. Psalm.
Say that again. You broke up a little bit.
Psalm 26:3.
Psalms 26,
verse
3.
Yes. Devin, would you read Hosea 6:6? Rusty, would you look up Jeremiah 31, verse 3? Did you hear that, Rusty? Cecil, I'm glad you stopped. Exodus 34, verse 6 and 7. Boy, I have scriptures for everybody tonight.
6 and 7. Got it. Thank you.
Kathy, you still with us?
Yeah.
Kathy Doofman. Kathy, you'll have to wave your arms, but more than that, you'll have to unmute yourself and let me know you're here. Oh, there you are, Kathy. Kathy, would you like a verse?
Yes, please.
Would you read Proverbs 19:22?
Okay.
Okay. I've got some more verses, but we'll just start with that. That's quite a few. And here's where I would like to start tonight. So does anybody remember when you were growing up or going to school and you memorized the planets? How did you memorize the planets? What did you use? Like, some people just memorize it. Oh, knuckles. Rusty, tell me about those knuckles. What are you talking about? You don't have to tell me all the planets just because you forgot. Just tell me what you were doing there.
It was every other. It was top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom.
Isn't that for the calendar?
I don't think so. I think that's what we did for the planets.
Really? How does that help you remember the order?
I have no clue.
Devin, what did you do?
Many vicious earthmen jump straight up near, when you're my age, it's Pluto.
Okay, a mnemonic clue. Can you tell us that one time, Devin? I've never heard that one.
Many vicious earthmen jump straight up near Pluto.
Okay, many vicious earthmen jump straight up near Pluto. So
Yeah, except now you have to leave Pluto off, so it's a bad sentence.
So I learned it. My very excellent mother just served us 9 pizzas. But if you leave off Pluto, then you can have my very excellent mother just served us nachos. But I'm going to forever keep Pluto on there. It's a mnemonic device because there are 9 planets. I didn't even know this, but they qualified Pluto as a dwarf planet. Then they let Pluto back in. But there are other dwarf planets out there. I didn't even know. So there's like a Ceres, there's a C one, and they just keep adding these dwarf planets. I didn't even know that. Let's just stick with the basic 9 for the lesson for right now. What I'm trying to point out is sometimes when you have to memorize a list, mnemonic devices helps. A mnemonic device helps. So my very excellent mother just served us 9 pizzas, helped me memorize the planets: Mercury, Earth, Venus. Oh, excuse me. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Very excellent. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto. You know, and I can't help myself, but if anybody makes a Uranus joke, I'm going to laugh. I laugh every time. And it doesn't matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter how stupid it is. And it doesn't matter how crass it is. I will laugh at every Uranus joke. Okay.
You need to go to Branson, Missouri. On the way, there is Uranus, Missouri.
There's a fudge factory there, and they sell fudge from Uranus. I can't help myself. Okay, let's get off Uranus and continue with the lesson.
Also, order of operations, Dale. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. PEMDAS.
That's a good one. Say that one more time, please.
Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. The parentheses.
Yes, for math. That's for math. Yeah, very good. Yeah, mnemonic devices. We use them all the time. Well, we're going to study a word tonight called CHESED. If you want to write that down, it is CHESED. CHESED. And you have to say it like you have something caught in your throat. It kind of looks like this. So here's the word CHESED. And if we're reading in Hebrew, we have to read backwards. So there's the word backwards. I don't know what any of these letters are because I'm not a Hebrew scholar. But CHESED, when it's used in the Old Testament, and it's used, look at all these verses it's used in. It's used over 200 times in the Old Testament. You don't have to write these down. I'll show you. I'll tell you which ones to write down. And every time it's used, it's kind of a way to describe another facet of God's love. And so God's love is multifaceted. If you look at it from one perspective, you kind of get another ability to know who God is. But there are so many words that can describe God's love, and there's so many different angles you can take in looking at God's love, and we're going to look at those verses tonight, that we need a mnemonic clue to know God's love. So that's what we're going to do when we read our verses. I'm going to give you a word that goes with God's love, that goes with the verse you use, and then at the end we'll try to put it into a mnemonic clue that we can help remember all the many words that go along with CHESED. Are you ready for that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. So the first one, let's go with Jeremiah 32, verse 18. Here is the first word I want us to remember about God's love, his CHESED. In different translations, it's sometimes translated mercy. Sometimes it's translated steadfast love. Sometimes it's translated loving kindness. One word, which is it's a compound word, loving kindness. There's just no one English word that translates the Hebrew word into English straight away. So you'll see it in different translations will have a different word for it. Sometimes it's translated compassion. Sometimes it's just translated love. Sometimes it's translated loyal love. It's got, because there's no one English word, that's why they use a lot of different words in the translations. So what we'll do is I'll have the first word that we're going to use comes from Jeremiah 32:18. I think that's Brendan has that one. Brendan, would you mind unmuting yourself and reading that verse out loud?
Jeremiah 32:18. You show love to thousands, but bring the punishment for the father's sin into the laps of their children after them. O great and powerful God, whose name is the Lord Almighty.
Oh, I didn't like that translation at all. Can you read that one more time, please?
That is the NIV translation.
Oh, that's the one I was using. Read it one more time for me, please.
Okay. You show love to thousands, but bring the punishment for the father's sins into the laps of their children after them. O great and powerful God, whose name is the Lord Almighty.
Okay, that works. We can use that. We can work with that. So when God shows love to thousands, if we think about this, he says he's going to punish. Another translation has he's going to punish the sins of the father for up to 2 or 3 generations. And then, but if you think about it, we've got these two opposite sides of God. On the one hand, he's going to show love to thousands and thousands and thousands of generations. And on the other hand, he's going to punish the sins of the father for 2 or 3 generations. Well, thousands of generations is a lot bigger than 2 or 3 generations. God leans toward love. Yes, God hates sin. God is a just God. But he seems to lean more toward mercy and love. And that, I think that verse right there kind of reveals how he leans. He wants us to succeed. We are his children. We are his creation. He wants us to have forgiveness. So he shows us right there, I'm going to give mercy to 1,000 generations. I'm going to punish 2 or 3 generations. But the word I want us to remember is generational. His chesed is generation. Generational is the word we want to look for. So if you're taking notes and you wanted to see what it looks like in my notes, it would look like this. So right here, right across from Jeremiah 32:18, we have this word generational. That's what we want to use there and write in our notes. If you wanted to read it in context, you could go back and read Jeremiah 32:17 through 44, kind of get the context for what God is talking about. And I wouldn't want to read this passage without reading Jeremiah 33:6 through 11. We kind of see how God is a forgiving God. And this is how you can take notes in my class. Wave your hand after you write down those 2 verses. You don't have to write it all down. And I can also email you this page when we're finished if you don't want to write it all down. But once you write the Jeremiah passages down, we'll go on to the 2nd verse. So wave your hand at me when you have it written down. I guess you could pick your nose or give me a raspberry, but you'd have to unmute yourself for that. Okay, so generational is the first part of God's love. Everybody understand? We're good? We ready to move on? I don't remember who had Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22. Joe. Oh, perfect. Joe, will you read that one, please?
Sure. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease.
Faithfulness of the Lord. Is that right?
The faithful love of the Lord.
Faithful love. It never ceases. So how would you describe his chesed? Notice there that they used faithful love to define chesed in that one. What word would you use if you said, hey, it never ceases?
Unending.
Infinite.
Unending, infinite. Those are 2 good words. Let's use infinite here for our word. And it just kind of goes right across. If you want to read that passage in context, you would look at Lamentations chapter 3, verses 1 through 24. Do you all need me to make this bigger when I share the screen?
It's okay. Okay.
It's okay? Okay. Well, thanks. I'm glad it's working. Okay, so Lamentations. Again, I can email this back to us. Next is Isaiah 54:10. Isaiah 54:10. Who has that one? Don't remember. I'm not taking notes. Okay, Tanja, go ahead. Isaiah 54:10. Tanja, you'll have to unmute your computer. Sorry. Your lips are moving, but you're not making any sounds. Oh, you are unmuted. Some reason your microphone's not working. Just sign language it to us.
You put it on chat.
Yeah, if you want to copy and paste it into our chat down there. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. We can come back to you though if you can figure out how to talk. Ken, did you have one too? Oh, I didn't give you one? I have one for you. All right, Ken, would you look up Zechariah 7:9? Of course, you can't tell us what it is, but we'll come back to that, Ken.
Yeah,
Hang
you
on
gave
to it.
me Psalms.
Say that again, Ken.
You
Okay.
gave me Psalms 26, verse 3.
Yes, but we have two Kens. Sorry, I had the other Ken has Zechariah. Sorry about that. We're going to come back to Ken. We're going to come back to Tanja. And who had Ruth chapter 3? Is that you, Mita?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead with your verse, please.
Ruth 3:10. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor.
In that verse there, Boaz is talking to Ruth. Ruth's husband has died, and she has kind of made a play for Boaz, her kinship redeemer. Boaz is a little bit older than Ruth, and he can't believe that she would seek him out to be her new husband because Ruth is young and beautiful and loyal. And he says her kindness, he uses the word chesed there. He said it's absurd that you would want to come and love me. And you know, when I think about my sin in my own life, I kind of sometimes think God's love to me is a little absurd. So we're going to use chesed there. It's an absurd love. It's just too weird for us. Here's that word there. Don't look at covenantal. That's the word we're going to use for Tanja because we don't want to ruin her thunder there because she's going to read for us later and we're going to have to.
I think I got it.
Oh, you did get it.
Yeah. Hello.
Oh, well, why we have it right here. Will you go on and read Isaiah 54:10?
Yes, I will. Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken, nor my covenant of peace be removed, says the Lord, who has compassion on you. Who has compassion on you?
Compassionate. You could use compassionate or covenant. I like the covenant word, but you don't have to use that word. It could be compassionate or covenantal. It's a covenant love. It's a compassionate love. So you can tell already that when chesed is used in the Old Testament, and it's usually used to describe God, you can already tell that we're going to have a lot of words that use to describe this love. So if you were going to try to define it for somebody, I would want you to say, it's generational, infinite, covenantal, and absurd. Well, so far it's only 4 words, so it's easy to memorize. But we have 6 or 7 more words to add to our list. Has anybody ever looked, raise your hand, has anybody ever looked at this word before, chesed, and seen it in the Bible? It's one of my favorite words. Sometimes when we read a passage of scripture and we do a Bible study, the Bible study becomes radioactive to our soul. It just something about it strikes us, and we can't help but say, oh man, I love this passage of scripture. And we end up wanting to share it with everybody. Now, usually when that happens to me, nobody else cares as much as what I care about that passage. I don't know if that's happened to you, but if you've ever had a verse really jump out at you and it becomes radioactive to you, and then you're so excited you want to share it with everybody, and you take it to somebody else, they're like, yeah, whatever, it's in the Bible. But sometimes it just, and sometimes it catches. This word chesed has always caught my attention, and I just love it because it describes God, but it describes him in so many different ways. So right now we have generational, infinite, covenantal, and absurd. Now we're going to move to Jonah chapter 4, verse 2. Okay, go ahead, Francine.
Okay, it says, he prayed to the Lord, isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abandoning in love. Abandoning in love. A God who relents from sending calamity.
Thank you. Thank you for reading. Yeah, I love this verse. This is actually a verse that's repeated in the Bible quite often, that God is slow to anger and abounding in love. And there's a word that Jonah uses in here, gracious. In this passage, Jonah is mad because he didn't destroy the Ninevites. God has relented. And Jonah's like, I knew if I came here, you would give them mercy. You would give them grace. So God's chesed is gracious. Jonah uses the term chesed in that passage. A lot of times when we think about Jonah and the big fish, we think maybe he was running because he was scared, or he was running because of this or that. But he was really running. He tells us in chapter 4, he was running because he didn't want the Ninevites to be saved. He knew if he went there and preached that some would repent, in this case it was the city, and that God would be kind and forgiving. And Jonah knew about God's chesed. He knew that God would be that whole, I'm going to give 1,000 generations forgiveness versus 2 or 3 on the punishment side. He knew it. So he said, God, I hate that you did this. Can you believe somebody would be mad at God for giving grace? I heard a story one time. I love this story. There was a preacher, and this was back when iPods first came out. Everybody know what an iPod is? So this was probably 2010 or 2011. This preacher invited 2 people on stage, and he gave them both a gift. No, it was 3 people. He gave all 3 people a gift, and they opened their gift, and one guy got an iPod. And it was kind of expensive then. And he was like, oh, I got an iPod. Yes. You know, it may be $100 or $150. I don't remember when they first came out. And then the next guy got like a $25 gift certificate. And he was like, oh, I got a $25 gift. That's pretty good. And then the last guy just got an apple, like a piece of fruit. Now, and then the preacher kind of like played it up, and he made the point. Everybody got a gift that they didn't earn. They didn't deserve. It was all a gift. But one guy got more than the other. And then both of the guys got a lot more than the guy who got an apple. And then he asked this question, who do they have to be mad at? Because the guy with the apple could be mad at the guy with the iPad or the iPod because he had more, which is kind of how we act on earth. When somebody has more, we sometimes get mad at the person that has more. But the preacher said, I'm the one that gave the gifts. If anybody should be mad at anybody, you should be mad at me. I'm the one who gave the apple, and I'm the one who gave the iPod. And when we start talking about the gracious love of God, some people do receive more grace. And some people are richer, some people have better health, and we can get mad at the people that have more, or the people who are rich. But really, we have to take this out on God, because God's the one who either gives or takes away. He's the one who's allowed some people to have some and some to have nothing. And you know what? God's big enough for us to be angry at him. Jonah in this passage is angry at God, but it's hard to imagine that somebody would be angry at God for the grace he gives. But when I think about my own life and my own jealousy, and I think about, Michael Jordan could slam dunk, and I was so jealous I wanted to be Michael Jordan. God didn't give me that gift. And so I don't need to be mad at Michael Jordan. I just need to work it out with God. And as I work it out with God and I wrestle with that, I realize God has given each one of us a different amount of grace, but it is overwhelming grace. It covers us over. He's very gracious to all of us, and we should never be mad at God if he gives some people more grace than he has given to others. And Jonah, is a great example of that. Okay, Exodus 34. Oh, you know what? That actually, I think that's supposed to be a little bit further. Let me check my map here.
The next one you said was Lamentations.
Yeah, don't read Exodus 34 yet. That comes at the end. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 32. Who had that one? Christy, thank you for reading that one.
I can see. Okay, for no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion. So great so great is his unwilling love.
I love that passage. In that passage, it shows that God's chesed is steadfast or sure. We can be sure of it. It's steadfast. It doesn't waver. Steadfast is the word we're looking for. Or you could put sure in there too if it helps you remember it better. And Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 3.
The Lord appeared
Oh,
to
wait,
us.
stop. I'm sorry. Micah 6:8 is next. I'm so sorry.
Micah 6:8.
I ruined your reading, Rusty. It was going to be so good, I could tell. My words are out of order on my page. Okay, go ahead. Micah 6:8.
I'm trying to unmute me. Okay, I got it. He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Oh, that's a good verse. Good job. Micah 6:8. Can you read that one more time, Miss Jeannie?
He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Yeah, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. That word in there for mercy is the chesed word. And that I like to think of that one as tender-hearted. If we're going to show mercy to others, we need to be tender-hearted. And when we're talking about God's love to us, when we're talking about God's chesed, he is tender-hearted toward us. We are his children. Tender-hearted is the word I want to use there. Hosea chapter 2, verse 19 and 20. Okay, Brenda, you have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Verses 19 and 20. I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will acknowledge the Lord.
Oh, that's good. Hosea kind of does this whole thing where God talks about in a marriage language. And that verse especially shows the marriage language. God's love, his chesed, is affectionate to us. You know, in that verse Brenda read, there was compassion and betrothal, and it's this marriage language that's going on. So affectionate is the word we're looking at. So far, God's chesed is generational, infinite, covenantal, because he makes a covenant with us, absurd, gracious, steadfast, tenderhearted, affectionate. By the way, this is really difficult to remember, so we're going to need a mnemonic clue when we get to the end. Hang on, I have a mnemonic clue for us to use. Tanja, you can take a picture. I don't mind, but I will send you, I can email it to you at the end. You don't have to take a picture unless you just like looking at it on your phone in a picture format.
That's fine.
Okay, I'm going to hide it. Don't anybody look at their notes. What are the words that describe God's chesed? Don't look at your notes. Okay, unmute and go. Try to do it.
Generational.
Generational.
Infinite.
Tenderhearted.
Tenderhearted.
Yeah, everybody talking at once. That helps. Good job. Okay,
Infinite.
everybody mute your mics again. Nice try. I know you didn't get them all, but you tried. That was pretty good. That was excellent. So next one. Now this one is bad. Judy's going to read two. This is the only place in the Bible where chesed is used in a negative way. But we're going to see what it means, especially when she does it with the second verse. So the two verses are Leviticus chapter 20, verse 17, and Joel chapter 2, verse 13. One is a negative use of chesed, and one is a positive use. And they both kind of explain the same thing. Okay, Judy, when you're ready, unmute and share that with us.
Okay, Leviticus 20:17. If a man takes a sister, a daughter of his father, or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace, and they shall be cut off in the sight of the children of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, and he shall bear his iniquity.
Okay, so that's not just talking about seeing somebody without their clothes on. That's talking about like having intimate relations, having, in the Bible, in the King James, he would have known her, is kind of how it means. And this is out of bounds. So the chesed there, it is the word where it's like, this is a disgrace. It's the only place in the Bible where chesed is used in a negative term, and it's out of bounds. It's you can put out of bounds in that place, or you can put overflowing, because either way, it's going outside the boundaries that is respectable. Judy, read the Joel passage that follows it up.
Okay. Okay. And rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster.
Okay. Again, Joel there is saying it's out of bounds. It's overflowing. He relents and he gives love even when we kind of don't deserve it. So here we can put overflowing or out of bounds. I like that word overflowing because it's just one word. Generational, infinite, covenantal, absurd, gracious, steadfast, tenderhearted, affectionate, overflowing. The reason why we know it's overflowing is because of that negative use. It's out of bounds. And if you can imagine God's grace, it just covers over us and flows over us and just continues on, and it is so out of bounds. It has a lot, it's very similar to that absurd use. Okay, Psalm 26, verse 3. Now we got Ken up.
Okay. For your love is ever before me, and I walk continually in your truth.
God's love is ever before us. It's right in our eyes. We can see it. It is witnessing to the love of God. His chesed witnesses to us what God's love is. Witnessing. God's love is witnessing. His chesed is witnessing to how good he is. It's always before us. My internet just said it was unstable. Am I breaking up?
Yes. A minute. Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah,
You
you're
are back.
Yes.
All right.
back. You just froze
Witnessing.
for a little bit.
Witnessing is the word there. God's love is always present before us. It is witnessing to his infinite, absurd, gracious, steadfast, tenderhearted, affectionate, overflowing, out of bounds chesed. Okay, we're almost finished. Is anybody bored? This is I feel like I don't want to bore you with the Bible. I think that's a sin. It doesn't say it in the Bible, but I think that's what God means, if we ever bore each other with the Bible. Okay, a couple more, and we're finished with this description, and then we're almost to our mnemonic clue to remember God's chesed. Hosea chapter 6, verse 6. Devin, is that you?
Yes, sir. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings.
That's not what I was looking for. We're going to do it. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Now that is a, I don't think that's the word I wanted to use there. Let me check my notes.
Mine says, I desire steadfast love.
Oh, okay. I remember why I chose this one. So because Devin, you are correct. You did read it right. Thank you. It is the right verse. Different verses translated a little bit differently. Remember how I said, okay, some are going to translate mercy, some are going to translate steadfast love. There's a verse, and I don't remember which translation, it says loyal love, and it translates chesed as loyal love. And so when God tells Hosea, I desire loyal love, not sacrifice, we're going to go for the word loyal here. And if you think about it, which would God rather you do? If somebody is hurting, would he rather you take your money and bring it into the temple, or take your money and help the person that's hurting? Well, especially the Pharisees were doing this. The Pharisees' parents, Jesus said, their parents were starving, and they set aside some of their money for the temple, and they set aside some of their food for the temple, and they said, oh, we set it aside for God, so we can't use it for you. And Jesus said, that is so wrong. You know, God doesn't need your money. God doesn't need your food, but he wants you to be loyal to the people around you. And when we're talking about God's chesed to us, we can mess up and be terrible, and yet God is still loyal to us. He has a loyal love to us. His chesed is loyal. And that is, I don't know what translation uses there, but one translation puts it as loyal love. Next is Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 3. Now, Rusty, now's your chance. Blow us away.
Yeah. The Lord appeared to us in the past, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness.
Yeah, I love how God's love draws us close. God's love is alluring. Alluring. Now, that kind of sounds creepy. I did like enticing better, but it doesn't fit in my mnemonic clue. So we're going to go with alluring. God's love is alluring. And it is beautiful. It does lure us to him, but not in a creepy way, in a really good way. Alluring. That word is hard for me to say. Okay, so far, God's love is generational. It's infinite. It's covenantal. His chesed. It's absurd. It's gracious. It's steadfast. It's tenderhearted. It's affectionate. It's overflowing. It's witnessing. It's loyal, and it's alluring. Now, Cecil, 34, verse 34, verse 6 and 7, please.
6 and 7. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation.
That was excellent reading, Cecil. Forgiving is the word we're looking at there. God's chesed is forgiving. Now, if we were to put these verses in chronological order, that verse would actually be the first one out of the list we've read so far. And that is a theme. You know, it's found on Mount Sinai. It's found with the 10 Commandments are being given. This word that Cecil read, that is a description God uses to describe himself. And then that phrase, which we've already read it once or twice already, that phrase is used over and over and over again to describe God in the Old Testament. I think it's used, I want to say it's used in every single book of the Old Testament, but that's not true. But it's almost used in every single book of the Old Testament. I'll send you a link when I send this page out. The Bible Project did a link on that one verse. They said, hey, this describes God, and it's used over and over and over in the Old Testament. It's about a 5-minute video, and it's pretty neat how they show you where all it's used in the Old Testament. Okay, so we have A through M. I don't know how many letters that is. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M. 13 words. That's more than the 9 planets, but it does include the dwarf planets. 13 words to describe God's chesed: generational, infinite, covenantal, absurd, gracious, steadfast, tenderhearted, affectionate, overflowing, witnessing, loyal, alluring, and forgiving. Okay, don't look at your notes. Does anybody remember it? Joe wants to try. Go ahead, try. We're ready. We're ready. You got to unmute though.
I accidentally brought a different window up and I couldn't see you all. So my question was, do I want to try? I don't know.
Go ahead. I saw you earlier.
I'll try. Generational, infinite, covenantal, gracious, absurd. This is where I get a little lost.
Doing pretty good so far.
Yeah, really.
You remember any other words?
Steadfast. We had that one.
Yep, that's the next one.
Brendan's helping me out. Tenderhearted,
Yes.
alluring,
Uh-huh.
witnessing, loyal, forgiving.
You missed one.
Ugh.
Overflowing.
Overflowing.
Nice job. That was excellent.
Wow.
Excellent. Now, it's one thing to know and be able to describe God's love for us. It's one thing to be able to memorize all those words and say, you know what, when we're talking about the love of God, we're talking about chesed. And, you know, when we hear those words, some people like to say something like, the God of the Old Testament is way different than the God of the New Testament. The God of the Old Testament seems mean, and Jesus, the God of the New Testament, seems like he's really nice. But when we start studying God of the Old Testament and we realize that his love is generational, thousands of generations, infinite, you know, it's enduring forever. Covenantal, he makes this covenant bond with us like a marriage. And even when we're unfaithful, he remains faithful. He's tenderhearted and steadfast and affectionate. And you know what? His love is witnessing to how awesome God is. And it's so enticing, alluring to us. We find out that the God of the Old Testament is exactly like the God of the New Testament. Sometimes we forget that Jesus could be pretty harsh too, when he would respond to sin or people who were rejecting him. The God of the Old Testament is exactly the same as Jesus reveals him to be in the New Testament. God never changes. But it's one thing to know this about God, but we need to be transformed by this. So I'm going to look at a couple other verses. I passed one out to Ken Ledford, and I passed one out. I don't remember who I gave Zechariah to.
You gave Zechariah to me.
Oh, who did I give Proverbs to? Kathy. Kathy, you're here. Do you want to turn your camera on, or you good?
I don't know how. I think when I joined, I forgot to say yes, and I don't want to go out and come back in. So.
Oh, well, how about now? Did it ask you?
No.
Well, let me try one more time.
But you can hear me, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm glad you're here. Okay, Proverbs 19:22.
Okay, what a person desires is unfailing love. Better to be poor than a liar.
Okay, this proverb says we should desire to have chesed. So in that verse, chesed is defined and translated as unfailing love. And Proverbs 19:22 says that should be in our heart. We should desire chesed. Now that's a pretty big call. Think about God's chesed, how it's affectionate and overflowing, and everything he does is a witness to his love, and how it's so enticing to other people. And God tells us in Proverbs we should have the desire to have that same love. Zechariah 7:9. Go ahead, Ken.
This is what the Lord Almighty said: administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another.
Good. What translation are you using? That was good.
NIV.
The NIV. We are. Can you read it one more time?
Sure. This is what the Lord Almighty said: administer true justice, show mercy and compassion for one another, to one another.
We're supposed to do this. So not only should we desire it, but we should also do it. He uses the word administer in that translation. We don't have to memorize this, but we should know that this is something we should be doing. Somebody earlier had Micah 6:8. Who had Micah 6:8 that we should be tenderhearted? Will you read that again, Miss Jeannie? Oh, you have to unmute. Don't forget to unmute.
I'm sorry. Not good.
There you go.
Okay. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Okay, we're hearing that to do and desire again. It's required of us. This is required of God's people to do chesed. to desire chesed and do it. It's required. This is a command to God's people. Hosea 6:6. Somebody had that earlier too. Who had Hosea 6:6? Will you read that again, please?
Yeah. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offering.
Here's that word again, desire. This is what God desires from his people. Now, this is Old Testament, of course. So that was his people in the Old Testament. Does God still require this of his New Testament people? So I didn't pass this one out. It was Matthew chapter 9, verse 9 through 13. And there's this great picture of Jesus here doing this verse, doing chesed. And you're going to hear Jesus quote the Old Testament, and now he's talking to us, the New Testament people. Jesus is calling his disciples, and in chapter 9 of verse 9 of chapter 9 says this: as Jesus went out from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Okay, does anybody not know that Jews and tax collectors didn't get along? Like, tax collectors were outcasts. Did everybody know that? Did everybody go to Sunday school class and learn that? Nobody likes tax collectors. We don't even like tax collectors today. The IRS, if you work for IRS, we would ask you to leave our Zoom class. It's just the way it is. It's just the way, we just don't like tax collectors. Brenda just left. Brenda, it's okay. I was just kidding. Brenda's a CPA. She knows how to do taxes, and she does them. Brenda, I'm just kidding. You can come back. Okay. Okay. So here Jesus is. He's with his followers. He's being followed around, and he calls Matthew, Levi, a tax collector, come be part of his crowd, to come be his disciple. This is absurd. This is overflowing. This is grace that cannot be, well, we've heard of that before, haven't we? Follow me, he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. Verse 10, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, now Jesus has really gotten out of bounds. He's actually eating at this outcast's home. And Matthew apparently invited all of his friends. Well, he doesn't have any legitimate Orthodox friends. He doesn't have any good friends. They're all sinners and tax collectors, because that's the only people that can hang out with tax collectors, is other unworthy people. And here Jesus is eating with all of them. Many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked the disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Why do you eat with them? Oh, I can't believe it. Jesus, I love this. On hearing this, Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. That's Hosea 6:6. Guess what that word is? Chesed. Jesus is quoting Hosea to New Testament people. He's always giving New Testament people the way. This is the way you're supposed to live. And here he is saying, I desire. He quotes God. I desire. Jesus says, I desire chesed, not sacrifice. For I've not come to call the righteous, but I've come to call sinners. Pharisees get a really bad rap, and deservedly so. But if we were around the Pharisees, we'd be like, those are really good people. They go to church, they follow all the rules, and they give money. This is the people we'd be like, well, we can't wait for them to come to our church. They follow all the rules and they give a tithe every week. Well, they followed all the rules, but they were leaving a whole group of people to die. A whole group of people they weren't going and being tender-hearted to. They had shunned them. And Jesus says, you've done all the right sacrifices, but your heart is not right. Your heart is still too hard. You are not tender-hearted. I desire chesed. And that's what Jesus was giving. He was giving chesed to those tax collectors and sinners. God is always trying to draw us in. His chesed is so alluring. And you know what? God doesn't change. So when Jesus shows up and he reveals to us exactly who God is, it's no wonder that he looks like a God who is having absurd love and gracious love and a steadfast, sure love. We know how Jesus is going to react every time he meets somebody. In John chapter 8, that story about how the adulterous woman, she's caught in an affair. They bring her before Jesus. They're like, Jesus, you're supposed to stone this woman. And it doesn't surprise us that Jesus says, okay, whoever sins, they get to throw the first stone, and then everybody leaves. And then he forgives the woman. Most Bible scholars say today that passage doesn't belong in John. Somebody added it later. Our earliest manuscripts, our earliest gospels, it didn't have that passage in it. They have all these scriptures from antiquity, and it's not there. It's only newer versions that have it in there. But I believe it is inspired by God and added by the Holy Spirit, because that is exactly how we would expect Jesus to act. That's exactly what a God who shows up and shows chesed would do. He's so tenderhearted. He's so loyal. He's so forgiving. This is our God. And this is required of us. We are supposed to act like Jesus. So our prayer has to become that we have the same love that God has, the same chesed. And so in our notes, I want to make sure that we see this. I'll share the screen. When we're talking about transforming our hearts, chesed is required of us. Jesus doesn't let us go and not become like him. Now, we can't earn our salvation by acting more loving, but when we act loving, we actually reveal we have been saved. It's an identity. When we do the actions of God, we're not earning or we're not gaining our way into heaven, but we are proving that we are actually saved. Just like if you don't do the love of God, then your salvation can be in question. Because if there's no change in your inner person and there's no change in your outer works, you're allowed to question somebody's salvation. You're allowed to say, hey, did it really do anything to you? Because you have no works to show that your faith is real. That's where James comes in and he says, faith without works is dead. If you're never tenderhearted toward the outcasts, we got a problem. It doesn't mean we're going to do it perfectly. It just means we're going to be kind of consistently changing and growing to be more like this Christ that he has shown us. Okay, that's our prayer. Oh, look at that kid. Hey, Calvin, nice to see you, buddy. Where's Hobbs? Can you go get Hobbs and show us Hobbs? Where is he? All right, Calvin, if you think about it, go get Hobbs and show me Hobbs. Now, here's our mnemonic device. Here's what we're going to use for our mnemonic device. And I made it easy. It's better than my very excellent mother just served us 9 pizzas. It's even better than that. In Exodus 34, the verse that Cecil read for us, the one that is repeated all throughout the Old Testament, that's what's going to be our mnemonic clue. And I'm gonna show it to you right now so you can use it. God is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. That has all of our words: generational, infinite, covenantal, absurd, gracious, steadfast, tenderhearted, affectionate, overflowing. Oh, that one actually fits. Witnessing, loyal, love, alluring, and forgiving. That took me a long time to get all those words to line up, but it did. If you use Exodus 34 verse 6, now I did change it. This part right here is supposed to be Yahweh, Yahweh, the Lord, your God is compassionate. But I just put God there. I figured it's okay. We know who we're talking about. God is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. Exodus 34:6. That is a good way to describe chesed, but it can also help us, if we want to, remember generational, infinite, covenantal, absurd, gracious, steadfast, tenderhearted, affectionate, overflowing, witnessing, loyal, alluring, and forgiving. Now, I can see everybody taking notes. I appreciate you taking notes. Thank you for doing that. It really makes my heart so warm to you that if you're taking notes, if I see you taking notes during church on Sunday, you're taking notes to my sermon, I'm blown away by that. So I see you taking notes, but I am going to send this to you in email so you don't have to remember or write down. If you miss something, I'm going to send it to you. I'm also going to send a video that talks about this verse and how it's used over and over and over again in the Old Testament to describe who God is. But what we can't forget and what we can't leave here without knowing is that we are supposed to show the same kind of love. It's required of the followers of Christ to be the same as what he reveals to us. Everybody got it? Okay, we are out of time, but I'll allow 2 minutes for questions. Does anybody have a question before we go? Raise your hand, unmute yourself. Let me know. Kathy, what's your question?
Does the word chesed ever show up itself in the Bible?
Yeah.
Well, it's the Hebrew word, so if we're reading the Hebrew Bible, it shows up all the time. But when we translate it into English, that's where we start losing the meaning because there's no one equivalent word in English.
Okay.
The closest word we have is grace. But we define grace a little bit differently than we would say something like unmerited favor. God's going to give it to us. We don't deserve it. Giving us something we don't deserve. So that's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close. What's really cool is in John, it says grace and truth. Jesus, I think it's in John, Jesus is full of grace and truth. Well, in the Old Testament, chesed, grace, and emet, truth, is oftentimes linked together, describing God. He is full of chesed and emet, which is grace and truth, if we want to translate it that way. Sometimes emet is translated justice, and sometimes chesed is translated with all sorts of different things, steadfast love, loyal love. But it's really kind of neat that John, who was a Hebrew, who was an Israelite, would describe Jesus as full of grace and truth. But that is chesed and emet, and it's used a lot. And you'll read it in the Bible. It'll translate in the NIV as justice, but every once in a while they'll translate it as truth. Other versions will translate it truth. It's grace and truth, grace and truth. Same in the Old Testament as in the New. It's really, really interesting to me anyway. You might be bored to death. Good question, Kathy. Another question? Oh, thanks for hanging out with us. We're going to do another word next week, talking about grace. We're probably going to do the word gospel. That is next week. It will surprise you. It's going to surprise you what the gospel is and what the gospel is not when we get it in the scripture. Thanks for watching, everybody, tonight. If you have any other questions, you can email me or text me. I did record this. If you want to watch it later, I can send you the link for the video. You can see all of our smiling faces. And this is also how I'm going to be sure to email everybody. I see a picture here. I got it. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. And thanks for taking notes. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good.
Very interesting.
Well, you made it to the end. Thanks for joining our Zoom Bible study. Don't forget that you can practice 2 ways of using this new knowledge of chesed to start transforming your heart to look more like Christ. Number 1, memorize Exodus 34, verses 6 and 7. And number 2, meditate on that verse. Meditation is just thinking about all the different ways you can apply that verse to your life. For example, where do you need to be gracious? Will you be gracious? When things don't go your way, are you going to be slow to anger? And who do you need to be tenderhearted toward? If you liked what you watched in this video, or if you learned something, you can practice chesed in 3 small ways. Hit the thumbs up button, maybe subscribe to our video, and share this video with somebody that you know needs to be transformed by the words of God. I'll talk to you soon.